another edition of Chraj And You, where we break down the triple mandates of the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice, Chraj, into relatable and practical conversations that matter to you. Now think of a time when someone used inappropriate language to describe you and how that made you feel. Did it cause you to feel offended, shunned, or discriminated against? In another light, did it affect your ability to fully and meaningfully participate in a conversation at that material time? In today's edition of Chraj And You, we continue with the conversation on promoting and protecting the rights of persons with disabilities. However, our focus is on how the use of inappropriate language can adversely affect persons with disabilities and why it is important that as a community, we embrace or we adopt inclusive language. I am Rufina Dimbwe Paovi, and it is an honor to be your host. Let's settle down for another thought-provoking yet educational time here on Chraj And You. Viewers, please bear in mind that this is a 30-minute interactive session, and so please let's remember to share our comments, questions, and also send in our thoughts as the conversation progresses. Today, I sit with the Acting Director of Public Education at the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice. He's also the focal person on disability rights here at Chraj, and over the years, he has served in other capacities advocating for the rights of persons with disabilities here in Ghana. Mr. Mauli Abuto, thank you for making the time to join us again today.
Thank you for having me.
You are welcome to Chraj And You.
Thank you.
To begin the conversation, viewers, I'm sure that most of us have heard of the word inclusion and the adjective inclusive. It's a term that has been used quite often in recent times. And so for the purposes of our discussions today, I want Mr. Buto to kindly explain to us what inclusive language is as it relates to persons with disabilities.
Thank you very much for this important question. The United Nations, in its deliberations on the human rights of persons of individuals, just after the Second World War, recognized that there are certain group of people who are very vulnerable, and for that matter, are subjected to certain form of discrimination and marginalization. In recognition of this, the UN therefore adopted the use of inclusive language such as everyone, no one, all persons. This is to promote the rights of persons with disabilities. What then is inclusive language? Inclusive language simply means using words, technologies, and phrases that respect the individual as a human being and focus on the person's participation in life and society rather than the person's impairment or disability. That is simply inclusive language.
Thank you very much, Mr. Buto. That's a very insightful explanation of what inclusive language is. Moving on, viewers, please bear in mind that we're streaming live on Facebook, and so kindly send in your comments and your questions, as well as join the conversation by sharing your thoughts on what inclusive language is and why it's important to adopt this as a society. Sometimes in the everyday language that we use certain phrases or terms that we think is very harmless. And so, Mr. Buto, can you share some examples or some of these common phrases that we use in everyday language, which might actually be non-inclusive or offensive to persons with disabilities?
Thank you. Like you rightly pointed out, there are certain phrases, terminologies, and words that, if used, would dehumanize the person or are very derogatory to the person. Some of these are using the phrase like persons living with disabilities, persons living with albinism. If you use the phrase living with, it means that the people are living with these disabilities in perpetuity or perpetually. Meanwhile, the medical model of disability emphasizes that disability is a medical condition that can be cured or treated. And so if you say the person is living with, it's like the person will continue to live with it in his or her life. There are also words like the deaf, the blind, the cripple. These are also derogatory and are not acceptable in society. We sometimes also use certain euphemisms, like your argument is lame. The cripple, we are like the cripple and the floor, which the accounts will say, Unity said, by finding firm. These are all unacceptable language that cannot be used in our modern society and must be avoided as much as possible.
All right, so there you have it. Some of these terms that Mr. Vuto has listed, cripple, lame, etc., are terms that we use just casually in conversations without really recognizing the significant or adverse effects it has on the person that you are addressing using those terms. And so I hope that this has been very educative to you. It's been thought-provoking as it stands to you. And so moving on with the conversation, we want to understand now what are some of the impacts that the use of non-inclusive language can have on a person with disability, either economically, socially, or emotionally.
Thank you again. As I said earlier, these terms are derogatory and also dehumanize the person involved. And so we should be able to avoid some of these terms because of their impact on the individual concerned. For example, if you use these words, they stigmatize the person involved. They stigmatize in the sense that they tag the person in a particular form. When there is this tagging or stigma, it leads to discrimination where people treat them in different ways. Then it can also lead to isolation. Because of the tagging of the person feels not to belong, and so the person may start isolating him or herself. It can also lead to loss of self-esteem, the people, to make them as if they were not human beings. And so there will be that kind of loss of self-esteem. It can also lead to death. If the person suffers from that particular uninclusive language for long, that person may sometimes commit a suicide. And it happened in Ghana before, where somebody suffering from halitosis was being humiliated because of that disability, and the person had to commit suicide because of that uninclusive language that was being used on him. So we should be able to avoid this kind of conversation in our everyday life.
The consequences are real, and sometimes it goes beyond affecting the person individually or personally, but it also sort of reflects on how the society treats the person. So it's not just about how the person feels when you use such language, but also how the society sees that category of persons. To continue with the conversation, let's bring a legal context into the conversation that we're having right now. And so for purposes of this discussions, we want to know, Mr. Vuto, are there any laws that protect the persons with disabilities in Ghana in terms of when it comes to discrimination or the use of offensive language?
Yeah, thank you once again. Interestingly, per my reading of international human rights laws and then regional human rights laws in relation to persons with disabilities, I have not come across any specific provision on that. Thankfully, our Disability Act, that is the Act 715 that Ghana promulgated, in Section 37 made provision for calling people with derogatory names. For example, Section 37(1) says that a person shall not call a person with disability derogatory names. If you go to Section 37(2), it says that a person who contravenes this provision commits an offense and is liable on summary conviction of a fine not exceeding 50 penalty units, or on a term of imprisonment not exceeding 3 months, or to both. So you can see that clearly in Ghana we have specific provision in our Disability Act that protect people from being called derogatory names. So we should be careful the way we call people by those kind of phrases or names, especially with respect to persons with disabilities.
Viewers, you've heard it from Mr. Vuto. Persons with disabilities are protected under Ghana's legal framework. And so when it comes to discrimination, be careful with the words that you use when you're describing or referring to persons with disabilities. And to our final question, Mr. Vuto, in relation to every life, for those of us watching or even listening, are there some practical things that we can do as a community, as a society, that can promote disability rights?
Definitely, we have a role to play in this. The first thing that we need to do is to use persons first or people first language. For example, if you want to call somebody who has a hearing impairment, you say person with visual impairment. That is the person that, excuse my language, cannot see. You say a person with visual impairment. If the person cannot hear, you say the person that has a hearing impairment. If the person cannot walk, you say the person with physical impairment. Then we can also educate people on this and then advocate. For example, what I'm doing here is part of education to the people that I think Chraj to continue this on a large scale to promote the rights of persons with disabilities. We should also be agents of change in this regard. We should be able to advocate for the rights of persons with disabilities to avoid some of this uninclusive language that we use against them. We can also give them a helping hand when the need arises. The fact is that persons with disabilities is not their challenge is not the disability, but the challenge are the barriers that society creates for them that makes it difficult for them to participate on equal basis in their lives and society at large. And so we should be able to give them what we call reasonable accommodation that will enable them to participate equally on in our society when the need arises. So this is what we can do to promote their rights and to avoid this kind of discrimination against them.
So there you have it, viewers. This is where we draw the curtains on today's edition of Chraj And You. I want to say a big thank you to our resource person and our guest, Mr. Mauli Avuto. He's the acting director, of public education at the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice, for all of the insights that he has shared. This is actually very eye-opening. It's thought-provoking. It's thought-provoking. And so I hope that as you continue your day, you would bear this in mind that persons with disabilities are expected to be accommodated. You shouldn't use derogatory words when describing them, and you should also respect them, show them some respect and some dignity. I want to also say thank you to our amazing viewers at home for making the time to join us again today for this session. I want to encourage you to connect with us on our social media handles at Chraj Ghana. Also visit our website at www.chraj.gov.gh for additional information on human rights, administrative justice, and corruption. Please make the time to join us again next month for another edition of Chraj And You. My name is Rufina. It has been amazing having this conversation with you. Thank you and have a good day.